Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we are going to do a review, and actually it is on the House of Prin, which I love doing these Prin reviews. I own zero from the house, although, well, that's not true. I do own one from his Strangers line, which is like the more boring designer stuff, and I'll review that one of these days, but it's probably my least favorite Prin that I've actually smelled. I'd take some of these crazier ones over the cigar rum that I have, and I should have waited, but I just did a fresh application. I don't know if you can see it on my skin, but today we're going to be talking about a fragrance called Mongolian Mriga. I probably should have waited until I started the video, but you can probably still see it shimmering off my skin here. I dumped a bunch of it on, and I've got about a 3 or 4 hour dry down, which, to be fair, that is the most I've gotten into this fragrance, and I've only had a chance to wear it to bed twice. It's actually a newer edition. One of my perfume god people very kindly sent this to me, and anytime I see a Prin or one of these artisanal houses, I love diving right in. I mean, I'll never own a bottle of this unless someone gifts me a bottle, but I'll never own a bottle of this, so this is kind of one of those reviews where it's either do the review on your first impression, initial impressions, if you will, early impressions is what I call them, or probably it's something I would never get a chance to talk about on the channel. So Mongolian Mriga came out in 2023, and its claim to fame, and you can get it in the opening. I mean, I literally just put this on before I clicked play, which was dumb. Probably should have waited. People like to see the application, but when you first apply, the star of the show makes a little bit of an appearance, and then it recedes into the background, and that star of the show is Real Deer Musk. Now, I've reviewed many Real Deer Musk fragrances on the channel. You can see a lot of them, from the Ensars to the Bortnikovs to the Aries Ladores, and right from the beginning, when you first apply this, you get that kind of hint of real deer musk that just cannot be replicated, if you will. There are some very good synthetic deer musk alternatives, but the smell of real deer musk is really something to behold. And this is a special type of deer musk, which we'll talk about later on. And it's funny because many people were telling me, Ramsey, this is going to be like your most favorite Prin, or I know you'll love Mongolian Mriga, on and on and on. And so I was expecting this to be like, I'm blown away, like one of the best Prin creations. And Prin, as you know, he's a weird one. Sometimes he'll spend 8 years on a composition. Sometimes I feel like he'll do like one trial run for 15 minutes and put the fragrance out. He just kind of throws stuff against the wall. He's kind of like a weird mad scientist type guy. But this fragrance is not my favorite Prin, I will tell you that. I think I much more prefer things like Mogao. Was it Mogao or Mora? I can't remember now. They all blend together. But he did one. He did a couple which I really enjoyed. I think it was Mora, actually. I also really liked the Chilla, which was a very interesting rubbery Thai oud. But this fragrance has Prin's fingerprints all over it, and it's funny because of the fact that it uses real deer musk, which I don't think I've reviewed any Prin fragrances that use real deer musk. I think all of them are a deer musk accord. So I was expecting this to almost smell completely different, you know, like all of other Prin's works are over here on the diagram, and then there's this one dot with Mongolian Mriga over here, and that's not the case, to be honest with you. I was almost a little bit surprised at how much his fingerprints are all over this fragrance from the very beginning. Like, if you gave me a blindfold and said, Ram, smell this and which house made it, I bet you I would be able to guess this was a Prin, because it just has, you know, and it wouldn't be a shot in the dark either. I mean, it has kind of his fingerprints and his DNA all over it. This weird combination of spices and animalics and notes that don't seem to go well together, you know, like his creations are unbalanced, if you will. There's this weirdness to them in the opening to me, and they always have been. I've got an entire Prin playlist. Like, if you're new to the channel or new to the House of Prin, or you've never, you know, smelled any of his work, or you want to chuckle, go watch my old Prin reviews. But the opening on many of his fragrances feels like shock value perfumery, you know? Like, the way I've described it is like he's trying to shock you into being impressed, if you will. Like, wow, I've never smelled anything so crazy. This must be amazing. And for me, it just doesn't do that for me. But I will say the first minute or two that this is on your skin, and I applied it right before, so maybe even, let's say, 5 minutes, you do get hints of that beautiful musk. It jumps forward, it leaps forward at you. And, you know, like the like the furry underbelly of a cat or something. You know what I mean? Um, there is this like a tiger leaping at you. I mean, there is this kind of furry, grainy, musky, beautiful kind of smell that hits you right from the beginning. Slightly chocolatey, slightly floral as well. The musk in here does come across as slightly floral, um, and but then it recedes, and what comes to the forefront, like right now, I'm already getting it. So I would say maybe like 3 to 5 minutes in, you'll probably start to get it. Is that weird Prin unbalanced spice animalic thing that I've discussed in many of his fragrances over time. His style just seems to push everything out of the way and take over, which is a bad thing in this case. I wish the muskiness stuck around longer. It does come back later on. It hits you with a little bit in the beginning, and then it comes back later on. And I've done quite a lot of work on the House of Prin. Um, I'm sure there are some. I don't know if there's anyone else who's done more than me, other than the guy that does like 1 minute videos. He seems to have a video on every single fragrance that's out there, but um, as far as like these more longer full reviews, I don't know if anyone's done as much work on the House of Prin as I have. And I've reviewed things like Nailubal, Homa, Antamara, Varuk, T'Challa, Haksan, Mogao, Mora. I mean, and I'm sure there's more. The list goes on. But I will say, if like I said, if you want some entertainment, go watch those old Prin reviews. Some of his accords in those videos I described as things like old dried up dog turds that kind of a older dog, you know, like one of those 13 to 15-year-old dogs that's kind of halfway blind. You let the dog out, it'll go in the backyard and like eat the turd of the other dog and then lick you with its rotten gingivitis breath, old dog breath, you know, mixed with turds. I've described some of his openings as that. I swear to God, I've described some of his openings as cat turds straight out of the litter box, where you know the litter is literally stuck to the turd, and you put it in the boiling cauldron that he's making to create his fragrances, stuff like that. I mean, crazy openings. And what's interesting is I get this traditional Prin animalic weird shock value perfumery thing that hits not right at the opening, but now I'm getting it, and it's interesting because I don't know if it's just because I've smelled now so many of his fragrances that I kind of know what to expect, let's say, and I'm not as shocked. So it's hard for me to tell whether his fragrances are just not as offensive to me as they initially were when I first really started smelling some of these and doing videos on them. So I don't know if my just my the tolerance that I have for his animalics has really shot up to the point where I can accept some of this easier, because I will say this doesn't put me off as much as some of those other fragrances that I discussed, some of those insane notes have done. Okay, it's not as repugnant to me as it used to be. Um, and so, like I said, I don't know if it's just sort of my nose has adapted to his crazy level of insanity, or or whether his use of the fragrances has kind of, or his use of those type of notes have waned as the years have gone on, and I smelled some of his earlier work and now we're all the way to 2023. I don't know what the correct answer to that is. Maybe it's even a little bit of both, but I can tell you there are bits and pieces in here. If you're a hardcore Prin fan, there are definitely bits and pieces in here where you will say, I've smelled something like this before. Um, Really, to me, the only thing revolutionary is that real musk that he uses in here. Everything else, if you're a Prin fan and you've smelled a lot of his work, probably will smell, I don't want to say redundant, but familiar. Okay, it'll smell familiar. So, a few challenging notes in this fragrance right out of the bat are going to hit you. Number one on my list, anyways, of challenging notes, like when I glance at a note listing, if I see this note in there, I'm usually like, this is going to be a challenging one. Like, you know how I often say, if tarragon is in there, I'll love it. This is the opposite. It's called spikenard. It's also referred to as nard or muskroot. Okay, and spikenard is kind of one of those fragrances notes that I tend to struggle with. It's related to valerian root, and it basically has this weird woody, musky, spicy combination, which you would think, oh, that doesn't sound so bad, but it has this weird, very earthy, sort of spicy animalic tint to it, if you will. And I've never smelled spikenard on its own. Like, I've never smelled the essential oil. Um, but the musky earthiness reminds me of kind of how I perceive costus root. Now, by happenstance, there is also costus root in here, but there are some fragrances that have spikenard that don't have costus root that smell very similar to me as well. So just imagine like unwashed animals or hair that's been unwashed for weeks. Or like if you've ever owned a dog and you've given the dog a bed and you let the dog go too long without having a bath and without like washing the cover over the dog's bed, and the dog just keeps going down and laying on it, and the oils from his fur and everything get on that fabric and just continue to build up this kind of weird musky dirtiness. If you know that smell, that is a lot of what spikenard and costus kind of feel like to me. And here and there in this accord, Prin seems to use over and over again um, this in Mongolian Mriga. So if you've smelled some of his past work, you're gonna get bits and pieces of that shock value combination. Like for example, the spice that's used in here is cumin and clary sage absolute, and the animalics will smell very familiar to you as well. There's one big difference here. Many times, when you smell a Prin, you're smelling. So when you smell a Prin fragrance, many of his fragrances will use real oud, which is a little bit of a novelty nowadays in the fragrance world. Although there's a lot more houses popping up that are, I call it the Russian Atom effect. What he did and what he's been able to accomplish, and it is amazing. What he's been able to accomplish have inspired others to want to do something similar. And so here you'll get real oud. In fact, there's multiple types of real oud in here. Maybe the most prominent is this wild Burmese oud, which to my nose just seems to like wrap the florals, because there's a lot of florals in here that I don't think enough people pay attention to the florals. So there's rose, there's jasmine grandiflorum, which is the honeyed kind of rolling jasmine I discussed yesterday in my review of Opus 9. Go check that. If you're a jasmine fan, check out my review of Opus 9. There's May Rose, okay? And so you can see the different types of florals that are in here. And what ends up happening with this particular type of oud, this wild Burmese oud, is it seems to kind of wrap the florals in this oudy, syrupy floral twist, okay? So that's the way I would describe it. Oudy, syrupy floral twist. It's hard to tell actually which ingredient is applying to the smell that you're actually smelling, because there's also this note of Suganda Kokila. I'm telling you, there's crazy stuff in here. So basically, it's a evergreen plant known as Cinnamomum glaucens. Sorry, I probably butchered that, but let's just say cinnamon berries for I'm not going to use a scientific name, but or I'm not going to try anyway since I know I can't pronounce it. But they are known to have this kind of fruit punch berry like smell. Okay. And so there is this weird kind of floral hint that will hit you in this fragrance, but it's like wrapped in oud. So it's kind of wrapped in a little bit of earthy, slightly smoky oud. And I must admit, I'm a little bit of a disadvantage because I've never smelled the original Mriga. So for those of you that don't know, Mongolian Mriga came out in 2023. The original Mriga, I think, came out years before, okay? So for all intents and purposes, this is kind of like a flanker. But the plan was to try to recreate the smell of Mriga using the real Mongolian deer musk, which is a pretty cool, I think, project, if you will. Now on his website, he says, can you still buy this even? 10 in stock, 10 left. Act now. Act now. Don't let future regret play a role. But anyways, he basically says that the goal was to give you an interpretation of Mriga, which replaces the deer musk accord from the original fragrance with deer musk pods from Mongolia, and aims to create a unique and distinct scent by using these real natural deer musk pods. Okay, so that's kind of the goal of Mongolian Mriga. But like I said, I've never smelled Mriga, so I can't say whether they've done a good job of interpreting it or not interpreting it. But for those of you that don't know, Mriga in Sanskrit basically means deer. Okay, so and so I can see the idea with the fragrance is to take Mriga, which is obviously built around this like synthetic deer musk accord, and then try and just use real deer musk. And in this case, Prin claims to use a very special type of deer musk, not just any deer musk. He claims he's using Mongolian deer musk, which I would love to know where he got that from, if it's legitimately Mongolian deer musk. But let's just say it's true, and that's exactly what he's using. And so one of the issues I have with Prin, and I've said this many times on other fragrance reviews from him as well, is that many of the times when I think about his use of real ingredients, which for a lot of folks, that's exactly why you would buy an artisanal house. You want to smell the real oud, right? Or in this case, the real musk. But I always think of him as like a second tier brand. And I know that can be a big put down to be called second place, but I really do think of him not necessarily as an also ran, but maybe not best in class. Okay, Arise La Doré, which by the way he reviewed he released Oud Taiwan today, and I missed it. I was out running errands with my daughter. Running errands. We went to trampoline park for half the day. I'm absolutely knackered, but I was out with her, and or Ensar, for example, I would consider his musks and ouds to be well ahead of what you smell in a Prin. And so if I was going to buy a Mongolian musk fragrance, which, I know those are very rare and hard to come by, but, let's say I had a big knot in my pocket and I wanted to buy a real Mongolian musk fragrance, I would go to Ensar. Ensar has a Mongolian musk fragrance, and I'm sure, I've never smelled it. I don't think I've smelled it. I don't think I have any of that juice, but, that's where I would go if I was going to look for a Mongolian musk fragrance. And speaking of Ensar, this is kind of how he describes Mongolian musk. He says that it's recognized for being almost hairless compared to its furry Siberian cousin. So what he means by that, if you ever see like Russian Adam holding one of his Siberian musk pods, it looks like it's got hair and fur all over it. Mongolian musk is completely hairless on the outside. And the scent imparts the vintage Kupang Santalum, which is kind of like a spiced, sweet, creamy, buttery, very legendary type of sandalwood. So he said it has a smooth, buttery, almost sandalwood-like meditativeness to it, with a sweet, almost chocolatey note, okay? Coupled with a sandy beach herbal effect reminiscent of ambergris, but more animalic. That's how he describes Mongolian musk. And again, I've never smelled Mongolian musk in its own form, so I would rely on someone like Ensar, who absolutely has. And actually, I think that's a pretty good description of the dry down um, of Mongolian Mriga, or even the very first opening, the early opening of this, the first couple minutes before it transitions into his crazy animalic, mad scientist spice accord. Okay, but the opening using the real Mongolian deer musk is very close to how Ensar describes it. It gives you a little bit of that chocolatiness, a little bit of that powdery granularness, and I love the sandy beach feel descriptor, because if you think about grains in a sand, from a beach, trying to talk here, come on, find some words, Ramsey, but think about grains, the sandy grains on the beach, and think about the sandy grains inside of the musk pod, and giving it that chocolatey, and just imagine kind of the sweet, creamy butteriness of that sandalwood, the santalum that he was talking about. And that gives you a pretty good idea. The sparkly element, but more animalic. There's something a little bit as if it's really coming from the animal. I've said this before. It's almost like you can feel mentally in your brain parts of the deer. You can feel the fur. You can kind of sense the environment around him. And obviously real musk is used for two main things: warding off other potential rivals, saying, hey, this is my territory and I want you to smell what a big, strong, healthy male I am, or attracting a female by saying, hey, come check me out, I'm a big, strong, healthy male. So that's kind of what it's used for. But in this case, it's interesting because many people that I've listened to, when they talk about Mriga, the first iteration using the synthetic deer musk accord, they call it a green chypre style. Okay, and they do say it's a very well done synthetic deer musk accord, but I don't know. I have to take their word for it because I haven't smelled it. But I wouldn't call Mongolian Mriga a green sheepra just because when you think of green sheepra, I mean, what comes to mind? It's probably not something like this. It's probably something like maybe Dryad's a good example of a green sheepra, which I have a review of this on the channel if you want to check it out. This is fantastic stuff. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. If I was gonna wear a green sheepra, I would prefer this over Mongolian Mriga personally. But I know they're two separate styles. Um, but you know, it doesn't feel like that's a good descriptor for me. So it definitely does have this green tint though. And when I reviewed Nylubal, I called it kind of a sour, hoppy like smell because that also had this green aura to it. And that can definitely apply here as well, but I think this leans more foresty. You know, it has this side of things where you're going to smell like pines and firs, and hemlock fir, for example, is one of the crazy notes in here. And there's a bunch of crazy ones. It hints at the great Filinagio, and the reason it does is because if you can imagine this kind of green foresty side of things, but imagine like rising smoke a little bit, but instead of coming from the trees, it's coming from the soil. That's the weird part about it. Soil can also be slightly granular, just like the grains of sand on the beach, just like the grains of musk and pod, the musk pod. Um, and so here you kind of get this smoke but rising from the earth mixing with the greenery. So imagine you're smelling like the green leaves and the pine needles on the ground and all that stuff. Slightly smoky, um, slightly animalic from two sources: the oud, the musk, and also all the weird animalics that he has going on, like the costus root and spikenard and all that stuff. And so I think, you know, if you dive right into this fragrance, and you notice whenever I started talking, I didn't mention the yuzu. There is technically a yuzu note up top. I guess I was a little remiss in not mentioning it. Um, but it's supposed to add this kind of citrusy, bright, fresh, zesty like smell, if you will. I like yuzu because it's a little off the beaten path. You don't smell it as much. It's not the usual bergamot lemon combination thing. But honestly, I mean, I think it just gets swallowed up by this insane spice animalic combo that he's got going on that just seems so unbalanced, seems out of focus, if you will. And so maybe if I was able to focus a little bit, I could pick up a little bit of that yuzu in the top, but really that beautiful deer musk like accord hits you right from the beginning. And maybe it's brightened up a little bit by the yuzu, but I think unless you're like unless you're like a Prin fanatic, or um, you know, you're accustomed to taking this kind of a beating in the opening of a perfume, I think most people in the top, when they're smelling this fragrance at first, where the yuzu would normally be, they're probably going to focus on the musk and that crazy Prin mad scientist accord. So I think they'll be so shocked by kind of what they're smelling that they're not going to focus too much on the yuzu. I don't want you to get the impression at all that this is like a citrusy. It's not. It's nothing like that. So there are other weird notes in here, as if all the weird stuff I said so far is not weird enough. There's a note of Choya Ral Absolute, which is derived from sal trees, and it's supposed to add this leathery, smoky thing going on. And so if you can imagine this herbal fragrance, which is what this is, it's this herbal green halo tint thing that's musky, granular in a way, but almost recreates the environment that the deer are living in. That's a great way to think about it. If you can think about recreating the environment that the deer live in, they graze in, you know, they mate in, all of this stuff, right? You're recreating the environment. They rub their fur on the tree. I don't know, do deers do that? I assume they do. I mean, I don't imagine they're like bears where they stand up on their hind legs and scratch their back, but I assume they rub up against a tree and a piece of their fur gets caught on the bark and all this stuff. So imagine that. That's a good imagery of this, but imagine it being very soily and earthy. There's this sort of granular is a good word because granular implies the soil and it implies the musk. And I mentioned the grains of sand on the beach being a good representation of that. So here's how Prin describes Mongolian Mriga. He says the scent is one that creates a sense of raw, savage, and wild, reminiscent of the natural habitat of the deer, of deer musk. It seeks to evoke a sense of untamed wilderness and primal energy. So, as you can see, earthy, soily, green, musky, animalic. If you like Prin's style, I think you could go for this. But for me, this would be a pass. I would definitely pass on this. Even though I've enjoyed getting to know it, I didn't like it as much as some people thought I would. But I didn't hate that hardcore animalic thing he's got going on as much as I have in past Prin. So I guess it's kind of like you know, six in one hand, half dozen in the other kind of thing. And I do think there is some real value here to having real oud and real musk, which is, that's why you would pay the big money. But Mriga was 190 bucks for 30 mil or something. This is, brace yourselves. There is a downside to this because this is a 30 mil bottle is 420 US dollars, which is, let's try that again. Um, so he tries to play it off on the website by saying this is a limited one-time release, and actually the wild Burmese oud is no longer available anymore, so get it now. So I don't know. The picture on the website kind of shows this Mriga bottle in like a very dark, dank forest with little sunbeams coming through, with the deer musk in the deer, almost his eyes lit up like he's a predator, and you just shined a night vision light on him with the fangs kind of coming down, and in the background there's all these eyes in the background like a pack of hyenas. I guess that's a good image picture of it. Maybe I can put that on the cover page if I can make it fit. But yeah, it is what it is. Okay, it's got character to it. I'll say that. I mean, it's not a boring fragrance. It's not same old, same old. Maybe if you're very into Prins, it may not be reinventing the wheel, but I mean, it's okay. But for $420, I don't know. That's a lot. That's a lot to ask. Honestly, I'd rather pay 800 and go get the NSAR personally. If you're gonna spend that much money, but that's just my 2 cents. Let me know what you think. It's been a pleasure as always doing these reviews. Thank you to my perfume god people. I wouldn't be able to do it without you, without all the support and sending me stuff like this. It really does help because there's only so much one man can do, and so it takes a village sometimes. So I appreciate you making the channel what it is. As always, it's a pleasure. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think on the Prin. I will have some list videos coming up soon I'm working on. So as always, thanks for watching. Cheers. Have a good night. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.